Institute. But joining me now from the National Center for Public Policy Research, an organization dedicated to being a voice, in part, in corporate meetings. One of the areas where we have watched the left maneuver public policy has been in the boardrooms of America. Remember that it was the threats of the boardroom of the corporations in North Carolina. They tried to hold them hostage in Indiana. And it's been that same thing here in Texas with the Texas Association of Business holding ransom any kind of conservative or religious freedom or anything along that line. You watch them basically threaten to impact economies. Well, Justin and his organization go into these corporate boardrooms as shareholders and present questions to them regarding their very sometimes leftist views. So I want to welcome Justin to the program. Justin, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Pastor Greg.
It's good to have you back with us again. Well, the most recent corporate incursions, I guess we could call them, that you have been engaged in were GE and Coca-Cola. Let's hit GE first, and then we'll jump to Coca-Cola. As you went and spoke and listened into and were a part of that, what were some of the things you were looking at GE that you wanted to make sure got addressed?
Sure. So both meetings actually occurred on the same day. So I attended the GE meeting last Wednesday in Asheville, North Carolina, and I sent one of my colleagues to the Coke meeting for us. But on General Electric, we actually got a proposal on the company's proxy statement. So every single shareholder in the country that received a GE proxy statement got to read about what we were trying to advance. And what we did there was we took a look at some of the corporate donations that GE had been making that seem, extremely controversial.
Okay.
We'll put it that way. And we wanted to shine a little bit of light. So we just put in a shareholder proposal that asked the company very simply, hey, let's just go ahead and publish a list of the groups that you make donations to and explain why. Why did you donate to group X, Y, or Z? And we pointed out some that I think a lot of Americans would be shocked to know that General Electric is donating to. We pointed out that GE has donated funds to Planned Parenthood, to the Clinton Foundation, and to a group known as the Center for American Progress.
Wow.
And these are far outside of the mainstream. I mean, with Planned Parenthood, we don't even need to go into. You and all your listeners know the evils that organization is involved in. And obviously, in light of many of the undercover sting videos that were done at Planned Parenthood, other corporations that had been involved with Planned Parenthood and certain states obviously took moves to distance themselves from that abortion provider. And so GE is one of those that has stuck with Planned Parenthood. And so we thought that all investors have a right to know that. And GE they don't want to be transparent about it. But we think that the more investors know about it, the more potential it is for GE to hear from pro-life investors that, hey, this isn't why I'm giving you my money. So then you can turn around and funnel it to Planned Parenthood. We want to open up folks' eyes to what corporate America is doing, and that's why we put the proposal on the proxy statement.
Well, and why then if you're going to give money, for example, especially with the Center for American Progress, I mean, we know what Planned Parenthood does. We know what they're engaged in. We know what the Clinton Foundation has been engaged in, and we are pretty confident that that's not something we would like to see a company that we're supporting, putting money into. But the Center for American Progress, I think that's one that a lot of people, really don't understand what they are up to. And my question, I think, would be, okay, well, if you're going to give money to these radical organizations and foundations, let's balance things out. Why aren't you giving some money to, I don't know, the Heritage Foundation or American Enterprise Institute, or one of these other organizations that comes from the other side?
Sure, and that's just the thing. If they wanted to have a transparency report, maybe they do give to some of those groups, but again, they don't want to come out with the truth of what they're doing. And the Center for American Progress, just to educate some of the listeners that don't know, this was an organization that John Podesta ran for quite some time. He, of course, then became the chairman of Hillary Clinton's failed presidential campaign. And under his leadership, in 2010, following the midterm elections, they wrote a blueprint that you can actually go online and read right now. I believe it's a 49-page PDF of how President Obama could extend the power of the executive branch and essentially diminish the power of the congressional and the judicial branches. And, following that 2010 midterm, almost, line for line throughout that, President Barack Obama used that throughout the remainder of his presidency to expand the executive branch beyond what we have ever seen before in the modern era. So much so that by the end of his presidency, even the New York Times wrote an article admitting that President Obama had extended executive power so much that it was going to change the office of the president for decades to come. Well, why do I mention that? Well, A, because it screws up our separation of powers a little bit, but B, now that President Trump is in office and
right.
he is using his pen to sign executive orders, General Electric has come out and complained specifically about some of the environmental executive orders that President Trump has signed. So they helped fund the organization that wrote the blueprint for expanding executive power and now complain about the use of executive power.
Well, I think all you need to do, if you want to look them up, it's AmericanProgressAction.org. And if you take a look at it, matter of fact, for those of you that are watching us on screen right now, I'm going to bring their website over. And here's why. The front page of their website is a picture. It says the state of resistance. And then it is a picture of the protesters that we watch. Okay, I don't know how much more clearly could you present yourself as the anarchy Marxist leader organization than the picture state of resistance with a throng of individuals that are out there disrupting traffic. I don't know.
That says it all.
Right? Do we need any more? And I appreciate what you said, by the way, but here it is. What do they say? A picture is worth 1,000 words? Here's the picture. Okay? And they've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words. The state of resistance. Ta-da! We celebrate anarchy in America. Moving on. Anyway, okay, so that's what GE is supporting today, folks. I would have to think, and I know Jack Welch is long gone from there, but I would certainly think that would not be something that would have made Jack very happy.
No, I believe the company operated on a different spectrum during his era. That's for sure.
Yeah, I would think so. I have to tell you sometime about the story. I did business with GE when I had my company. And I sat in the office in Kansas City right next to Jack Welch's office when he was actually there back in the 90s.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. Folks, Jack Welch is business royalty. He really is. He's an amazing businessman. Anyway, all right. Let me not digress us in a different direction than we want to go here. Let's talk about Coca-Cola and their most recent ad campaigns, especially in light of, as you said, the connectivity between what they're doing in social media and the most recent signing today of the the Religious Freedom Protection Bill, or order, I should say, executive order that President Trump signed. Talk a little bit about what you ran into at Coca-Cola, or your company did.
Yeah. So what we did was, again, we filed a resolution, and we were actually the only ones to get a resolution on Coca-Cola's proxy statement this year. And what it was a resolution that pointed out a level of extreme corporate hypocrisy when it comes to freedom issues and religious freedom specifically. And so rewind to 2016, and the state of Georgia was attempting to pass a state-level religious freedom law. Well, this law did pass through Congress, and then Governor Nathan Deal down in Georgia came under extreme pressure from corporate America, from the NFL, the National Football League, and there was this group called Georgia Prospers that was really the ones lobbying very hard to get him to veto the bill. And eventually, his knees were weakened enough, and he did veto the bill. And so, again, we have corporations, these soulless entities, Coca-Cola, one of the biggest names in Georgia Prospers, working against a state-level religious freedom bill. Just got to step back and think about that for a moment. Mm-hmm. And a lot of folks are, it's obviously very troubling. We saw this in Indiana, as you mentioned. We saw this in North Carolina. You guys are dealing with it in Texas as well.
Right.
This idea of this really big push by leftist corporations and leftist organizations against religious freedom. Well, a lot of folks want to know why. Where did this come from? Because the idea of religious freedom has been around, obviously, since the founding of our nation. When it comes, and originally it came up through legal court cases, and then in 1993, the federal government signed a law that passed unanimously in the Senate, the Religious Freedom Restoration Bill.
Right.
Signed into law by none other than Bill Clinton. And a few dozen states at the time passed similar state-level measures. Well, fast forward to 2014, 2015, 2016, and all of a sudden, any state that goes about doing this now, they are just pilloried by the mainstream media and by corporate America. And why do we think that is? Well, when the gay marriage cases, it's just a theory of mine, but when the gay marriage cases got to the Supreme Court, they won quicker than they thought they were going to win. These guys are the proverbial dog that caught the car. There's organizations built up in and around Washington, D.C. and around the country that were sitting on gold mines because they were single-issue organizations out there fighting so-called discrimination and fighting for gay marriage at the court level. And when they won their victories, which is a whole nother segment, they had gold mines they were sitting on, and they needed something to do. These people still wanted to pay their mortgages. They still wanted to send their kids to private schools. And so they, in my opinion, then they pivoted to religious freedom generally, because these are anti-religious folks to begin with, and
right.
claimed that this was the new discrimination that they were out there to fight. And corporate America has been an incredible ally in this movement. And the mainstream media has been an incredible ally in the misinformation campaign around religious freedom laws. And so we put a proposal on Coca-Cola's proxy statement that really called them to the floor for being complete hypocrites. Because while they claim they, wouldn't want to do business in Georgia anymore if they were to pass this, bigoted law, they happily do business in countries in the Middle East where women have no rights, homosexuals are killed. I don't think we're having that happen in Atlanta right now or in Indianapolis.
Right.
But maybe that's happening in Riyadh.
And it's only happening in Michigan if you're a Christian.
Exactly. So, it's these companies need
Or
to be
Texas.
called out for what they are. They are anti-religious hypocrites.
Yeah.
And so that's exactly what our proposal said. And again, the tens of millions of people who have a Coca-Cola investment of some kind in their portfolio, they all got to read how hypocritical Coca-Cola is on this issue. And again, it's a misinformation campaign that is really being forced down people's throats, but it's just built on a house of lies.
Well, and let me once again also insert, when you talk about RFRA, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, and DOMA, don't forget about DOMA, okay? Both of these were passed and signed into law during President Clinton's presidency, and he was a strong proponent of both. He spoke very, very strongly and glowingly about the Defense of Marriage Act, marriage being between a man and a woman, the long-held history of that tradition and how important that was, and the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. It's interesting to see, of course, now how the spots have changed and how we have watched, his wife, Hillary, come out and would appear to be in complete opposition to this. And how sad is it that while DOMA has been struck down by the Supreme Court, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act might as well have been predicated on the way that lower courts have literally picked it apart one piece at a time.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And so while, the good news out of D.C. today, of course, is that President Trump did sign an executive order to bolster religious liberty. That's really, really just got to be the first step. There is way, way more work to be done because, as we know with executive orders, they only have the power as long as the executive is in power. And so Congress really needs to reinsert the teeth of laws such as RFRA that have been torn away. I completely agree with you on that. And so it is incumbent upon Congress to act to really work to protect the religious freedom issues that are being eroded all across the country. And I think another thing to note is that corporate America, much of corporate America, is already on board with this movement. But now that President Trump is in office and has vowed to work to protect and extend protections for religious liberty and Americans of faith, these corporations that already are anti-religious and have worked in the past against religious freedom, they're going to be more emboldened, not less emboldened.
Sure.
They're going to see themselves as the true opposition to President Trump and what he is trying to do because politically, liberals have very little clout right now. So they are going to turn to their allies in corporate America to help get out their message. And I think that it's important to really keep an eye on the transition that corporate America takes to ramp up their efforts because, again, I think a lot of the corporate leaders view themselves as the opposition party to President Trump's agenda, specifically on this issue.
Well, and the irony, of course, I guess, as it relates to that, when you say that they don't seem, they would appear not to have the power, and yet look at the budget that they just passed. Okay, when you look at some of the legislation that is coming forward and what all has been included in that, it really becomes difficult to say, oh well, we have a predominantly conservative we have Republicans in the House and Republicans in the Senate, and we have a Republican president, and yet everybody's celebrating. And I'm thankful, I just want to put this out there publicly, I am thankful that my Congressman Lamar Smith chose, and I will tell you that I lobbied very hard, I guess it's not lobbying, but I expressed in no uncertain terms my reasons why I felt that it would be a travesty for him to vote in favor of that bill, to include no security at the border, continuing to fund sanctuary cities, funding abortion, and the fact that there were no cuts, and we didn't do nearly enough, or are not doing nearly enough to assist our military in regaining the strength that Obama stripped from them over the course of the last 8 years.
Yeah, it's certainly the wish list don't seem to be getting checked off, perhaps in the hope, the speed that we would have liked, and I completely agree with your sentiment on that. And I hope specifically on the religious liberty issue that today is at a minimum a first step. I think that when we look at the court systems, I think the addition of Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court can only stand to help on these issues. He's been good on religious freedom issues in the past. And so I think there are silver linings that we had no hope of in the last 8 years, and at least we have hope now that we didn't before. While it's certainly a work in progress and these things are only first steps, I think there's a reason for optimism, but we've got a lot of work left ahead of us.
Yeah, there's no question about that, and we need to work on it. We definitely need to work on that. So let's get busy about making our voices heard, as you're doing, Justin, and we greatly appreciate that, and hope that we can continue to get the word out about what you're doing and get more people engaged and involved in it. The organization is found at nationalcenter.org is the website, nationalcenter.org, and I hope you'll get over to the website, check it out, and see how you can become engaged. Justin Danhof, thanks for being with us today. I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks, Pastor Greg. You have a great night.
You too. All right, folks, we're